Welcome back to Min Stories. Your narrator will be with you for today's story. Here, we don't just listen to dramatic life stories. We reflect together, draw profound lessons, and find the inspiration to live more meaningful lives. If you're new to the Min Stories family, don't hesitate to hit that subscribe button and the little bell icon next to it so you don't miss any of our videos. And, as a special welcome, please let us know where you're watching from by leaving a comment below. Your connection is our greatest motivation. Today, we will delve into a true story, a journey full of storms and unforeseeable twists. This is not just a tale of greed and betrayal within a family. It is also an epic of hidden strength, of the intelligence and resilience of a woman who turned her deepest tragedy into an opportunity for rebirth and self-affirmation. Let's listen and feel the story of Mrs. Margaret Sullivan, a wife and mother who went from the abyss of despair to the pinnacle of self-control and justice. Part 1. The unexpected storm and ultimate betrayal. When my only daughter, Victoria, for whom I had spent my entire life loving and sacrificing, looked me straight in the eye and uttered words as sharp as a knife. "Find somewhere else to die. You're useless now." My heart felt like it shattered, but, as if by a deeply ingrained habit, I obediently packed my bags, just like the submissive mother I had always been for so many years. Just 3 days later, however, sitting in a lawyer's office, I was stunned to discover that my supposedly loving husband had played the longest chess game in history. And Victoria, my little girl, was about to learn a lesson she would never forget. Sometimes, in the game of life, a pawn can become the queen. 2 months earlier, my life had been a series of quiet, peaceful days. I was Margaret Sullivan, a devoted wife of 43 years, and the mother of a spectacularly ungrateful daughter. When my husband, Robert, suddenly passed away from a heart attack at 71, I thought my world had completely collapsed. Grief enveloped me, turning me into a weak, confused, and directionless woman. And then Victoria, like a vulture cloaked in expensive designer clothes, swooped into my life at my most vulnerable moment. She cooed, "Mom, I know this is so hard for you." Her voice dripped with a nauseatingly fake concern. "You can't possibly manage this big house all by yourself. The stairs, the maintenance, all those memories. It's just not healthy for you." If only I had been clear-headed enough then to see the cold calculation behind those sweet words. Victoria had always been Robert's favorite, his little princess, a princess who could do no wrong in her father's eyes. When she married Kevin, an ambitious investment banker, and started giving us beautiful grandchildren, Robert doted on them even more. And what about me? Throughout all those years, I was simply the woman who cooked, cleaned, and kept everything in the house running smoothly. I was the silent support system, the unpaid manager of the very family I had built with my entire youth. After Robert's funeral, Victoria became increasingly insistent about my situation. She and her husband, Kevin, would often come over for dinner, and after each meal, they would corner me with real estate pamphlets and brochures for luxury retirement communities. "Mom, these places are wonderful," Victoria would say with a cheerful face. "You'll have friends your own age, fun activities, and most importantly, you won't have to worry about any responsibilities." But what they really meant, what was hidden behind those honeyed words was, there will be no inheritance to split and no inconvenient mother to deal with. And, right from these first details, we can see the very clear signs of a serious but often overlooked social problem. Elder financial abuse. This isn't just about stealing money. It includes more subtle actions like applying psychological pressure, deception, or emotional manipulation to seize an elderly person's assets. The abusers are often family members themselves, exploiting the trust and vulnerability of their victims. The storyteller is genuinely curious. Have you ever witnessed a similar situation in your own life? Please share your story and thoughts in the comments below. Every comment, every share, helps build a stronger community. And don't forget to hit like to spread this message. The final blow, the one that pushed me to the depths of despair, came on a Tuesday afternoon. I had been living in the house that Victoria now brazenly called our house for 6 weeks since Robert's death. I was still sleeping in the guest room, unable to face cleaning out the master bedroom. Victoria showed up unannounced with Kevin and 2 large suitcases. "Mum, we've made a decision," she declared flatly. "Kevin just got a promotion, and we need to move into the city immediately. This house is perfect for our family." I stared at her, stunned, still unable to grasp the cruel meaning of her words. "Move in? But this is my home." Victoria's perfect mask slipped for a moment, revealing a chillingly cold and emotionless calculation underneath. "Actually, Mum, according to Dad's will, I inherit everything. This house, the investments, all of it. I've been letting you stay here out of the kindness of my heart, but it's time for you to find your own place." Those words hit me like a physical blow. "Victoria, there must be some mistake." "There's no mistake, Mom. Dad knew I would take better care of his legacy than you ever could. You never understood money or investments. You were just a wife." Just a wife. 43 years of marriage, 43 years of endless sacrifice and nurturing, all reduced to those 3 cruel and bitter words. And then she delivered the killing blow, a final stab into my bleeding heart. "Find somewhere else to die. You're useless now." I packed my things in a daze of shock and numbness. 43 years of a long marriage now fit into 2 suitcases and a small box of faded photographs. Victoria stood at the doorway, repeatedly glancing at the designer watch on her wrist, as if I were making her late for something incredibly important. "There's a very nice senior complex on Maple Street," she suggested with the enthusiasm of someone recommending a decent restaurant. "Very affordable. I'm sure they still have vacancies." Affordable. My daughter, who was about to inherit a $33 million fortune, was suggesting a place for her own mother that was essentially a welfare facility for the lonely elderly. Kevin loaded my suitcases into their luxury BMW with the efficient, cold demeanor of someone throwing out the trash. "You'll love having your independence again, Margaret," he said, but he couldn't bring himself to look me in the eye. No more worrying about home maintenance or those pesky property taxes. What he really meant was, you won't have a home anymore. As the car pulled away, I watched my home, Robert's home, and now Victoria's home, disappear in the rearview mirror. The irony was bitterly painful. I had spent 4 decades of my life turning that place into a warm home, hosting memorable birthday parties for Victoria, tenderly caring for Robert when he was ill, preserving every little detail he cared about. Now I was being driven to a budget motel like an uninvited guest who had overstayed her welcome. The Sunset Inn was exactly what you'd expect from a place charging $49 a night. The walls were paper thin, the towels were even thinner, and the carpet had seen much better decades. Victoria handed me $200 in cash with the attitude of someone tipping a hotel maid. "This should be enough to cover you for a few days while you get settled," she said. "I'll have Kevin transfer a little money into your account once we sort through Dad's paperwork." A little money, from my own massive inheritance. After they left, I collapsed onto the sagging mattress and tried to process everything that had just happened. In the short span of 3 hours, I had gone from a grieving widow to a homeless senior citizen. The daughter I had raised, loved, and sacrificed everything for had discarded me without a second thought, like an expired prescription. Part 2, a glimmer of suspicion and the journey for justice. But as I sat there, in that bleak and dreary motel room, a vague thought began to stir in my mind. My husband, Robert, had always been an extremely careful and meticulous man, especially with important documents. He had shown me the will years ago, explaining all his wishes in detail, making sure I understood everything. And I was absolutely certain that its contents were not what Victoria had claimed. Robert may have been a traditional man, sometimes stubborn, and occasionally patronizing when it came to financial matters, but he was absolutely not a cruel and heartless person. The man who had held my hand tightly to help me through the pain of my mother's death, the man who had always surprised me with fresh flowers on our wedding anniversary, would never have left me destitute and without a place to live. The next morning, I used the motel's weak Wi-Fi to look up information on Robert's lawyer, Mr. Harrison Fitzgerald. He was the one who had handled our home purchase and many other business matters over the years. His office was downtown, a 20-minute bus ride that cost me precious cash, but I felt it was something I absolutely had to do. Harrison Fitzgerald was a distinguished gentleman in his 70s, with kind, warm eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. When his secretary announced that Mrs. Sullivan is here to ask about her husband's estate, he looked genuinely surprised. "Margaret, my dear friend, I was wondering when you would come. I've called your house many times, but Victoria said you were traveling." "Traveling?" That's what my daughter had told him. "Mr. Fitzgerald, I need to ask you about Robert's will." He looked puzzled. "Of course. Didn't Victoria give you your copy? I gave her the original and several copies after the will reading." My stomach clenched. There was a will reading. "Margaret, you were supposed to be there. Victoria said you were too grief-stricken and overwhelmed, so she would handle everything on your behalf and ensure you received your full inheritance." The blood drained from my face as the harsh and cruel reality hit me. "Mr. Fitzgerald, I was never informed of any reading. Victoria told me she inherited everything." Harrison Fitzgerald's expression immediately shifted from confusion to alarm. He hastily reached for a thick file folder on his desk. "Margaret, that's impossible. Your husband's will is very specific and clear about your inheritance." He pulled out a document. I immediately recognized Robert's neat and familiar signature at the bottom, fully witnessed and notarized. But as Harrison began to read the words aloud, I realized that Victoria had lied about everything. "I, Robert James Sullivan, being of sound mind and body, do hereby bequeath to my beloved wife, Margaret Ann Sullivan, the following: our primary residence at 847 Oakwood Drive, including all furnishings and personal effects therein. Additionally, I leave her 70% of all financial assets, investments and bank accounts, totaling approximately $23 million. My head started to spin. $23 million. The house. 70% of everything. Harrison continued reading, his voice growing more serious. "To my daughter, Victoria Sullivan Hayes, I leave the sum of $10 million to be held in a trust. Disbursements will begin on her 45th birthday, contingent upon her treating her mother with kindness and respect following my death. Contingent upon her treating me well." Robert had known. Somehow he had known exactly what Victoria would try to do behind my back. This is truly a fantastic example of wise estate planning. Mr. Robert didn't just divide his assets. He used intelligent legal tools, like a trust and a contingent clause, to protect his wife. A well-drafted will can indeed be the most powerful shield against greed. What do you think about Mr. Robert's foresight and love for his wife? Does this change your opinion of him? Leave a comment and don't forget to hit that like button if you're rooting for Margaret on her journey for justice. "Mr. Fitzgerald," I whispered, my voice trembling. "Victoria told me I inherited nothing. She moved into my house. She only gave me $200 and told me to find a facility for the elderly." The face of the respectable old lawyer flushed with anger. "Margaret, what Victoria has done is called elder abuse and fraud. She has committed multiple felonies." But she had legal papers. She showed me documents. Those were forgeries, most likely, or documents from an older draft. Your husband updated his will 6 months before he passed away, specifically because he was very concerned about Victoria's attitude toward money and her sense of entitlement. The room felt like it was spinning. All those times Victoria had dismissed my opinions, talked over me during family dinners, or rolled her eyes disrespectfully when I tried to contribute to their conversations about expensive vacations or Kevin's business deals. All that time, Robert had been silently watching, evaluating, and making his own decisions. "There's more, Margaret," Mr. Fitzgerald said. "The trust provision for Victoria very clearly states that if she fails to treat you with respect and dignity after my death, the entire 10 million will revert to you." I stared at him, stunned, unable to believe what I was hearing. I mean your daughter just cost herself $10 million. Her inheritance now belongs to you as well. You're not just inheriting $23 million, Margaret. You are inheriting the full $33 million, plus the house and all personal property. The irony was so perfect it was almost comical. Victoria had been so eager and hasty in seizing her inheritance that she had triggered the very clause designed to protect me from her bottomless greed. "Now, what do I do now?" I asked, my voice still shaky. Harrison smiled, and for the first time since Robert's death, I saw genuine and sincere warmth directed at me. "Now, my dear friend, we call the police to report the fraud. And then we'll call Victoria and let her know she's about to receive the biggest shock of her life. Can she fight this? With what money? She's about to discover that every account she thought she controlled actually belongs to you. Every investment, every bank account, every asset, everything will be frozen pending the investigation into her fraudulent activities." I thought about Victoria, probably in my house at that very moment, perhaps already planning renovations, shopping for new furniture with money she thought was hers. Kevin was probably calculating how the inheritance would affect his investment portfolio. They had no idea that in about 6 hours, their entire world was going to completely implode. Part 3, Operation Justice and the Fiery Showdown Lawyer. Harrison Fitzgerald's office quickly became the command center for what he cheerfully called Operation Justice. He contacted the police, the banks, and a private investigator while I sat in his leather chair, still trying to digest the full extent of Victoria's sophisticated deception. "These forged documents are quite sophisticated," Detective Rodriguez explained as she reviewed the fake will Victoria had shown me. "This was not a spur-of-the-moment crime. Someone planned this very carefully." "Do you think Victoria had help?" I asked. "Almost certainly. Creating convincing legal forgeries requires specific knowledge and connections. We'll need to investigate whether Kevin or someone in his financial network was involved." Within just 2 hours, every account had been frozen. Victoria's credit cards linked to the inheritance accounts she thought were hers were all declined. The utility bills for the house, which she had quickly transferred to her name, were suspended pending ownership verification. My phone rang at exactly 3:47 p.m. Victoria's name flashed on the screen. "Mom, where are you? There's some kind of mix-up with the bank accounts. They're saying Dad's assets are frozen." "Hello, Victoria. I'm sitting in Mr. Harrison Fitzgerald's office. Do you remember him? Your father's lawyer, the one who read the real will to an empty room while you were telling him I was traveling." Silence, then. "Mom, I don't know what you think you've discovered, but I've discovered that you're a liar and a thief, sweetheart. I've also discovered that your father was much smarter than either of us thought." "You don't understand. I was just trying to protect you from the complexity of managing all that money. You've never had to deal with investments." "Oh, I understand perfectly. You forged legal documents, committed fraud, and threw your 67-year-old mother out of her own house just because you thought I was too stupid to notice." Her voice turned sharp and desperate. "Mum, you're confused. The grief has been overwhelming for you, and someone is clearly taking advantage of your emotional state." Her audacity was breathtaking. Even caught red-handed, Victoria was still trying to manipulate me. "Victoria, my dear, let me clarify something for you. Not only did you never inherit anything, but even your actual inheritance, the $10 million your father left for you, is now mine, thanks to a lovely clause he included about treating me with dignity and respect." "That's impossible. Detective Rodriguez is sitting right here, if you'd like to discuss the impossibility of fraud charges with her. The phone went silent. I could almost hear Victoria's mind racing, calculating, searching for an escape route. Mum, please, can we meet somewhere and talk about this reasonably? I'm sure we can work something out. Oh, we'll definitely be meeting soon, at the courthouse when you're arraigned. You wouldn't dare press charges against your own daughter. Something cold and final crystallized in my chest. Watch me. I hung up and looked at Harrison, who was beaming in approval. Part 4, The Collapse of a Deceitful Empire. The police arrested Victoria at 8:30 that evening while she was having dinner at a fancy restaurant, apparently celebrating her inheritance with Kevin and another couple. According to Detective Rodriguez, she screamed about wrongful arrest and demanded to call her lawyer, who turned out to be Kevin's golfing buddy and had no experience in criminal law. Kevin was arrested at his office the next morning. Forensic accountants had traced the forged documents to a printing company that Kevin's firm used to create fraudulent investment prospectuses. It turned out my son-in-law had a rather impressive criminal resume that Victoria either didn't know about or chose to ignore. That night, I spent my first night back in my home in 43 years, and I slept in the master bedroom. Victoria had already moved her belongings into the space, replacing Robert's careful organization with the chaos of her designer clothes and expensive cosmetics. I packed everything into trash bags and left them on the front porch. Let her come get them when she makes bail. The house felt different now, not because Robert was gone, but because I was finally seeing it as my own. For decades, I had maintained it as Robert's sanctuary, designed around his preferences, his needs, and his vision of how we should live. Now, looking around with clear eyes, I realized how little of myself had ever been reflected in these rooms. And that was about to change. Harrison called around noon with an update. Victoria's bail was set at $50,000. Since all her accounts were frozen, she would have to find someone else to cover it. As for Kevin, his was $200,000. Apparently, the judge was not impressed with his history of financial crimes. What made me happy right now was the idea of undoing every assumption Victoria had made about my inheritance. She had planned to gut the kitchen, replace the hardwood floors, and convert Robert's study into a wine cellar. As for me, I would turn that study into an art studio, and the wine cellar plans would be replaced by a library. Part 5, When the Truth is Not Enough. 3 days after Victoria's tearful confession on my porch, Kevin's mother, Mrs. Eleanor Hayes, showed up at my door. She was everything I had imagined. Perfectly coiffed hair, dripping with jewelry, and radiating the kind of arrogant entitlement that can only come from 3 generations of inherited wealth. "Margaret, we need to discuss this situation rationally," she said. She sat down in my living room as if she were granting me an audience. "Kevin made some poor choices, obviously, but prosecuting him seems a bit vindictive, don't you think?" "Vindictive? Your son helped my daughter steal my inheritance and threw me out of my own house." Kevin was just following Victoria's lead. He didn't understand the full situation. This woman was actually trying to blame my daughter for her son's criminal behavior. "Mrs. Hayes, Kevin created forged legal documents. That's not following someone's lead. That's conspiracy to commit fraud." She smiled, clearly believing she had found an opening. "Kevin's family is prepared to compensate you for this inconvenience. Let's say $2 million in exchange for you dropping the charges against Kevin. $2 million to forgive the man who helped steal $33 million from me." "Mrs. Hayes, I think we're done here." "Margaret, reconsider. $5 million final offer." "My answer is no." She stood up, her composure fully restored. "Very well, but you should know that Kevin's legal team has found some rather interesting information about your husband's business practices. It would be unfortunate if that information became public during the trial." The threat was clear, but I felt no fear, only curiosity. After she left, I called Harrison immediately. That evening, I sat in Robert's study and began to systematically go through his files. And then, I discovered something that changed everything I thought I knew about my husband. The private investigator, Carol Chen, a sharp woman specializing in financial crimes, spent 6 hours in Robert's study. Mrs. Sullivan, your husband was running a sophisticated money laundering operation through his consulting firm. We're talking about millions of dollars in illegal transactions over the past decade. This revelation hit me like a physical blow. That's impossible. Robert was the most honest man I knew. I'm sorry, but the evidence is overwhelming. He was washing money for organized crime families, using his legitimate business as a front. And there's more. The $10 million Robert left for Victoria came directly from those laundered funds. If the FBI discovers this, they will seize everything as proceeds of criminal activity. The room began to spin. Everything. The house, the investments, all of it. Unless, Carol said uncomfortably, unless Victoria and Kevin's legal team already knows about this and is planning to use it as leverage. If they tip off the FBI about your husband's crimes, they might be able to negotiate for immunity in exchange for their cooperation. My daughter and her husband weren't just thieves. They were holding a nuclear weapon over my head. My phone rang. It was Victoria. Mom, we need to meet tonight. There are things you need to know about Dad, things that change everything. I already know, Victoria. I know about the money laundering. I know about the criminal connections. I know that everything your father left us is tainted. Mom, listen to me carefully. Kevin's lawyers have been in contact with the FBI. They're willing to let us renegotiate the situation. Kevin gets immunity in exchange for providing information about Dad's criminal network. You get to keep $5 million and the house. The rest goes to the government, and the fraud charges against me disappear. We all walk away from this mess. It was a brilliant plan in a sociopathic way. Victoria had turned my moral victory into her strategic advantage. She was asking me to help her profit from her own crimes by exploiting her father's crimes. I looked around Robert's study, seeing it clearly for the first time. The expensive furniture, the rare books, the art collection, all of it bought with blood money. After hanging up, I sat in the darkness. 43 years of marriage to a stranger, a daughter who had inherited more than just money from her father. She had inherited his talent for deception, but she had made one fatal mistake. She had underestimated who I was when my back was against the wall. I picked up the phone and called Carol Chen. Carol, how quickly can you get me a meeting with the FBI? I have a story to tell them, and I think they're going to find it very interesting. Part 6. The Ultimate Checkmate and the Final Truth FBI Agent. Sarah Martinez looked exactly like she was from Central Casting, serious, intelligent, and completely immune to charm. Mrs. Sullivan, do you understand that by coming forward voluntarily, you are potentially admitting to benefiting from the proceeds of criminal activity? I understand, but I would rather tell you the truth than let my daughter and son-in-law manipulate the situation for their own benefit. I laid out everything. Robert's hidden business, Victoria's fraud scheme, Kevin's forgeries, and the extortion attempt disguised as a settlement offer. Your daughter believes she can trade information about your husband's crimes for immunity from her own charges, Agent Martinez said. That's exactly what she believes, and she thinks I'll cooperate because I'm afraid of losing everything. Agent Martinez smiled for the first time. Are you afraid, Mrs. Sullivan? Agent, 2 weeks ago, I was a grieving widow sleeping in a budget motel. Today, I'm sitting here voluntarily confessing to federal agents about my late husband's criminal enterprise. Fear is no longer my primary emotion. What is? Anger. Pure crystallized anger at being manipulated by people who underestimated my intelligence for decades. Agent Martinez's smile widened. Mrs. Sullivan, would you be willing to wear a wire? 3 hours later, I was sitting in my living room with a recording device taped to my chest, waiting for Victoria and Kevin to arrive for what they thought was my surrender meeting. Margaret, our lawyers have structured this very favorably for you. Kevin said as he opened his briefcase. You retain the house, $5 million in clean assets, and complete immunity from any charges related to Robert's activities. Clean assets. That's an interesting phrase. When exactly did you discover Robert's criminal activities? I asked. I mean, did you know about the money laundering when you married Victoria, or did you only recently discover it when you were planning to steal my inheritance? Mom, what are you getting at? Victoria was starting to lose her composure. I'm getting at the fact that you two have been planning this for months, possibly years. The forged will, the discovery of the money laundering, even Kevin's connections to document forgers. None of this was spontaneous. That's ridiculous. Really? Agent Martinez finds it quite plausible. The color drained from both of their faces. Agent Martinez, Kevin whispered. The FBI. She's been very interested in my story about systematic elder abuse, fraud, and extortion, especially the part where you two tried to blackmail me with my dead husband's crimes. Right at that moment, Agent Martinez and two other federal agents walked into my living room. Victoria Sullivan Hayes and Kevin Hayes, you are under arrest for conspiracy to commit wire fraud, elder abuse, and attempted extortion of a federal witness. Victoria turned to me with an expression of utter betrayal. Mom, how could you do this to your own family? The same way you could forge legal documents and steal my inheritance, sweetheart. Except my way is legal. After they were taken away, Agent Martinez sat down across from me. Mrs. Sullivan, Kevin's warning might not be entirely empty. Your husband was connected to some dangerous people. But there's something else you should know about your husband's operation, something that changes everything. She pulled out a thick file. Mrs. Sullivan, your husband wasn't just laundering money for the Torino crime family. He was an FBI informant. The world tilted on its axis. For 12 years, he was providing information on their operations while appearing to facilitate their money laundering. The operation was so sensitive that even local FBI officers weren't informed. Everything he left you was earned through legitimate federal cooperation. So, the $33 million is legally mine? Exactly. Your husband passed away before the investigation concluded, but his cooperation over 12 years directly led to 47 arrests and the seizure of over $200 million in criminal assets. Your daughter and son-in-law's fraud scheme actually helped us confirm your innocence. The irony was so perfect it was almost poetic. Victoria had tried to steal my inheritance twice, once through fraud and once through blackmail based on incomplete information. Part 7, Rebirth and a New Beginning. 6 months later, I stood in the renovated kitchen of my house, making coffee for two. The morning sun streamed through new windows, illuminating countertops that, for the first time in 43 years, I had chosen myself. The past 6 months had been a whirlwind of legal proceedings, media interviews, and personal transformation. Victoria and Kevin were each serving 18-month federal sentences. My story had turned me into a prominent voice in senior advocacy circles. The Margaret Sullivan Foundation for Elder Protection had become my primary focus. Using $15 million of my inheritance, we were funding legal aid for seniors facing family financial abuse and supporting legislative changes to strengthen elder protection laws. My story had also captured media attention far beyond the initial news coverage. A documentary series called A Mother's Revenge was being developed, with all proceeds going to elder advocacy organizations. Victoria had written me 17 letters from federal prison. I read the first few, which ranged from self-justification to desperation, before deciding to stop opening them. Some relationships, once broken, cannot be repaired with words. The woman I was 6 months ago, grieving, dependent, willing to accept whatever scraps of dignity my family offered me, that woman might have felt obligated to forgive Victoria, but that woman was gone. I wanted Victoria to understand that her actions had consequences beyond legal punishment. I wanted her to know that she had permanently destroyed our relationship, and that her children would grow up knowing why their mother went to prison. 6 months ago, I was invisible, a widow with no money, no home, and no prospects. Today, I was a millionaire philanthropist with a foundation, a documentary deal, and a purpose that extended far beyond my own survival. My daughter tried to steal everything I owned and leave me homeless. My son-in-law created forged documents and threatened me with blackmail. They showed me exactly who they were when they thought I was powerless. They are not family, they are just DNA. Family are the people who protect you when you're vulnerable, not the people who exploit your vulnerability for profit. And look what I became when I stopped allowing them to define my worth. In my art studio, I had painted a self-portrait of a woman standing in bright sunlight, her face turned toward the future. The woman in the painting looked nothing like the grieving widow who had packed her life into 2 suitcases 6 months ago. This woman looked powerful, independent, and unafraid. She looked like someone who had learned that the best revenge isn't getting even. It's becoming everything your enemies never thought you could be. Thank you for listening to Margaret's story. An inspiring tale about the power of truth, courage, and rebirth. What lesson did this story leave you with? Do you think Margaret's final decision regarding Victoria was too harsh or completely justified? Share your perspective in the comments below. Every opinion is a valuable piece of our discussion. Don't forget to subscribe to Min Stories, hit like, and share this video with the people you care about. Because each of our voices matters, and our stories can be a source of inspiration for someone out there. This is the narrator from Min Stories, signing off. I'll see you in the next story. Have a wonderful day.